Welcome to Devotionary, where we make the Bible accessible and applicable. As the book of Isaiah begins to draw to a close, the prophetic tone of the book seems to increase in intensity. While the people of Judah were facing some serious judgment from God, He was letting them know that the future was bright. In spite of their rebellion, God was going to do great things among them. As He had spoken through the prophet Jeremiah, "I know the plans I have for you. They are plans for good and not for disaster, to give you a future and a hope." From their limited perspective, things looked bleak. But God could see all the way to the end, the literal end, and He knew how the story would eventually unfold. Isaiah chapter 60, verses 1 through 16, is a marvelous reminder of God's promise to be Israel's Savior and Redeemer. And while the people of Israel had initially rejected His Son when He came to earth the first time, God is going to make sure that His Son's second advent results in the salvation of His people. Despite generations of rebellion and a lengthy track record of rejecting God, the people of Israel would one day find their darkness illuminated by God's light, and their status as His chosen people restored. Ever since the fall and the entrance of sin into the world, mankind has been living in spiritual darkness. And yet the Apostle John tells us, God is light, and there is no darkness in Him at all. 1 John 1, verse 9. So each generation has made a willful choice to live in darkness, and their decision to reject God was in spite of the fact that God had made Himself known. The Apostle Paul reveals that their choice of darkness over the light had been driven by obstinance, not ignorance. For ever since the world was created, people have seen the earth and sky. Through everything God made, they can clearly see His invisible qualities, His eternal power and divine nature. So they have no excuse for not knowing God. Yes, they knew God, but they wouldn't worship Him as God, or even give Him thanks. And they began to think up foolish ideas of what God was like. As a result, their minds became dark and confused. Claiming to be wise, they instead became utter fools. And instead of worshiping the glorious, ever-living God, they worshiped idols made to look like mere people, and birds, and animals, and reptiles. Romans 1, verses 20 through 23. Mankind's rejection of God was driven by personal preference, not a lack of awareness. As John put it, people loved the darkness rather than the light because their works were evil. John 3, verse 19. They preferred to live in darkness because it allowed their sins to remain hidden. But nothing is hidden from God. He knows all and sees all. In the midst of this world drenched in darkness, God raised up a people, the people of Israel, to act as His lights to the world. They were to have been His personal emissaries, revealing to the rest of the world what it looks like to live in a restored relationship with the Creator God. The nation of Israel had been God's personal creation, the result of His covenant promise to Abraham. From one man, God raised up descendants as numerous as the stars of the sky. Genesis 26, verse 4. He had set them apart as His own possession, pouring out His love in the form of tangible blessings. Through them, God had chosen to reveal to the world what it looked like to worship the one true God. He had provided them with His law as a clear indication of His expectations concerning their conduct. He had established the sacrificial system as a means of obtaining forgiveness and cleansing for the inevitable sins they would commit by violating His law. They had everything they needed to live in harmony with God and to act as lights in the dark world around them. But the Apostle Paul reveals that they were missing something. You who call yourselves Jews are relying on God's law, and you boast about your special relationship with Him. You know what He wants. You know what is right because you have been taught His law. You are convinced that you are a guide for the blind and a light for people who are lost in darkness. You think you can instruct the ignorant and teach children the ways of God. For you are certain that God's law gives you complete knowledge and truth. Romans 2, verses 17 through 20. But they were hypocrites. They said one thing and did another. They claimed to be following the laws of God and took pride in their status as the people of God. But Paul went on to accuse them of living a lie. Well then, if you teach others, why don't you teach yourself? You tell others not to steal, but you steal. You say it's wrong to commit adultery, but you commit adultery. You condemn idolatry, but do you use items stolen from pagan temples? You are so proud of knowing the law, but you dishonor God by breaking it. No wonder the Scriptures say that Gentiles blaspheme the name of God because of you. Romans 2, verses 21 through 23. What had been true in Paul's day had been true at the time Isaiah wrote the book that bears his name. Israel was living in spiritual darkness, just like the pagan nations that surrounded them. They had long ago given up their role as God's emissaries and agents of change. Rather than influencing the darkness around them, they had been absorbed and consumed by it. So Isaiah reveals a significant promise from God that tells what is going to happen in the future. God was going to do something amazing and new. He would eliminate the darkness by raising Israel back to their original status as his lights to the world. This section of Isaiah speaks of the millennial kingdom, a future period of time when Jesus Christ will return to earth and set up his kingdom in Jerusalem, where he will reign for 1,000 years. And God lets his people know that there will be a change in their circumstances because he is going to restore them to a right relationship with himself. And he calls them to prepare for that future day as if it had already arrived. Arise, Jerusalem, let your light shine for all to see, for the glory of the Lord rises to shine on you. Darkness as black as night covers all the nations of the earth, but the glory of the Lord rises and appears over you. All nations will come to your light. Mighty kings will come to see your radiance. Isaiah 60, verses 1 through 3. At that time, the pervasive darkness of sin that engulfs the world will be eliminated by the light of God's glory, as revealed through the restored lives of his people. A remnant of the Jews will be redeemed by God and enter with him into his millennial kingdom, where they will rule and reign alongside Jesus Christ. And the nations will be attracted to the light of righteousness and justice that emanates from his glorious kingdom. Isaiah describes people coming from all over the world. Jerusalem will be the capital of the earth and the place where Jesus Christ reigns in righteousness. Jews from around the world will flock back to the promised land, and the nations of the earth will be attracted to the light of the glory of God. And Isaiah tells his Jewish audience that they will honor the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he has filled you with splendor. Isaiah 60, verse 9. What a remarkable difference. At the time Isaiah wrote this message, the people of Judah were surrounded by their enemies, and the splendor of Jerusalem was about to be destroyed by the Babylonians. But God had long-term plans for his people and for the city of Jerusalem. While he was going to bring his judgment upon his people, the day would come when he would reverse their fortunes in an incredible way. The tables would turn, and the people of Israel would be the recipients of tributes from the nations. They would be honored and revered, not threatened and destroyed. And it would all be God's doing. And he tells them, though you were once despised and hated, with no one traveling through you, I will make you beautiful forever, a joy to all generations. Isaiah 60, verse 15. And God reveals the why behind all of this. You will know at last that I, the Lord, am your Savior and your Redeemer, the mighty one of Israel. Isaiah 60, verse 16. For the first time in their long relationship with Yahweh, they will know and understand the significance of who he is and all that he has done for them. He will be their Savior and Redeemer, the very one they had chosen to resist and reject all those years. In spite of their unfaithfulness to him, he will maintain his covenant promises and do all that he has said he will do.